Ever wonder why so many incredibly expensive organizational change initiatives just fail spectacularly? It's literally like going to the doctor with a shattered leg and they just hand you a bottle of painkillers and send you home. In organizations, we are constantly treating the disease by only looking at the surface level symptoms while the underlying system causes remain completely intact. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to stop treating those symptoms and we're going to learn how to actually diagnose the system.
Think of this explainer as a masterclass in shifting your entire mindset. We're moving way beyond this idea of organizational diagnosis as just some preliminary HR formality or, a glorified employee complaint box. No, we're looking at how to build a powerful, ethical, evidence-based engine that drives actual, sustainable change.
Okay, let's dive right into this. We're going to cover the cost of misdiagnosis, unpack trust and data contracts, and look at finding the truth through triangulation. Then we'll break down Suleman's model of change, map out forces and transitions, and finally, cross that crucial bridge from diagnosis to design. Let's get started. So part one, the real cost of misdiagnosis. This is absolutely the moral and technical core of organizational development.
You see, diagnosis isn't just administrative red tape. Organizations constantly get trapped focusing entirely on the symptoms, things like declining service, high turnover, or extreme burnout. Take the case of a Lahar Apparel SME, for example. Management there saw plummeting morale and naturally tried to fix it with generic feel-good interventions. But the actual system causes, they were completely different. We're talking poor workload design, totally opaque promotion decisions, and really unclear decision rights. You absolutely cannot solve a systemic operational overload problem with a team-building pizza party. It just doesn't work.
Moving to part two, trust and data contracts. Because an evidence engine needs good fuel. Now, what's really interesting about this is that an evidence engine simply cannot run on bad data. And in the workplace, bad data is almost always born from fear and power asymmetry, right? To counter this, there are 6 essential elements that form a literal data collection contract. You've got purpose and scope, participants and access, the methods used, confidentiality and anonymity, data governance, and communication protocols. Listen, this is not administrative fluff. It's the absolute ethical safeguard that makes a valid diagnosis possible. If your people fear retaliation, your diagnosis becomes purely fear-based and therefore totally useless.
That brings us to part 3, triangulation, or how we actually find the truth in all this data.
So even if you have a rock-solid data contract, how do you protect your diagnosis from biased interpretations or fear-driven silence? Well, you use 4 distinct streams of data. First, we look at perceptions through surveys. Then we dig into meaning through interviews, to understand exactly why people are interpreting the reality that way. Third, we observe behavior, to see the real work and decision routines playing out in real time. And finally, we measure outcomes using KPIs. Why do we need all 4? Because even when employees are too terrified to speak up, a broken system is always going to leave numerical traces. When these 4 streams converge, your confidence skyrockets. But if they conflict, boom, you've just uncovered hidden assumptions or deep political distortions. All right, part 4, Suleman's model of change. It is time to bring out the organizational X-ray machine.
This concept brilliantly illustrates how we make the invisible visible. When we look at Suleman's model of change, or the SMC, Phase 3, the diagnostic phase, sits perfectly right between building relationships and action planning. What this proves is that diagnosis is not some detached one-off assessment that a consultant hands over and walks away from. Not at all. It is an iterative evidence engine built directly into a continuous cycle of change.
Inside that phase, a diagnosis is only truly complete when it generates 5 concrete deliverables. You need a diagnostic focus statement that's actually anchored to outcomes, tested hypotheses, a force field map, a transition profile, and, crucially, a diagnostic to design bridge. I want to be super clear here. These are not fluffy, descriptive reports meant to sit in a binder on a shelf gathering dust. They are the exact generative design specifications required to actually enact real change. Which leads us to part 5, mapping forces and transitions. This is how we map out the systemic limits.
To interpret exactly why an organization may be stuck in the mud, we use force field analysis. Think of driving forces like new regulatory requirements or shifting customer expectations as the rocket fuel pushing for change. But on the flip side, you have resisting forces, things like extreme workload strain or perceived injustice. These act as a hard stop. You have to measure the strength, the controllability, and the time sensitivity of these opposing forces. Here's a pro tip. If the resisting forces are highly controllable, the smartest strategy isn't just to push harder, it's to structurally redesign the system to remove the friction that's blocking you. Let's see how this builds into Lewin's phase logic, which is embedded right there within the SMC. First, you have UF, or unfreezing. That's all about creating the readiness and legitimacy for change. Then comes M, movement, the actual, messy execution of new routines. And finally, RF, refreezing, which is stabilizing the change so it actually sticks long term. Using this diagnostic lens, you can pinpoint exactly where a system is breaking down. Are your people lacking buy-in during unfreezing? Do they lack the actual capability during the movement phase? Or is the new behavior just not being rewarded and reinforced during refreezing?
Now, zooming in on that movement phase, we absolutely have to distinguish between stress and strain. They're not the same thing. Stress is the acute tension of learning a new routine. It's completely normal. It's like being sore after a really good workout. But strain? Strain is a cumulative, damaging system overload. It is like trying to run a marathon on a torn ligament. If leadership blindly pushes for movement without addressing the underlying system capacity, normal, healthy stress rapidly escalates into highly damaging strain. And that requires immediate system redesign, like serious workload rebalancing, before the entire effort just collapses. This brings us to a major mainstream management myth that we really need to bust right now. Employee resistance is a predictable system response to things like strain or capability gaps. Hear me out on this. It is not a moral failing. It is not a lack of loyalty. By mapping out human responses, we can literally segment groups into an acceptance region and a resistance region. When you finally start viewing resistance as a diagnostic signal from specific regions of your company, rather than a character flaw in your employees, you can actually tailor your interventions to exactly where the system is struggling the most. Finally, we arrive at part 6, the diagnostic to design bridge, how we turn all of this into actionable change. So the crucial point is, how do we actually cross from gathering all these findings into creating actionable solutions? Well, you have to literally walk your organization across this bridge. You start by translating those initial symptoms into hard operational questions. Then you build out your force field maps to find your highest leverage points. Next, you convert those findings into what we call a minimum viable intervention set, or MVIs. These are the precise, targeted routines that must be redesigned, rolling out in a highly focused 90-day implementation roadmap. And the last step? You institutionalize learning loops. This ensures the organization builds real internal operational and strategic capability, so it doesn't just survive one episodic change project, but actually learns to continually renew itself. I want to leave you with this provocative final thought, and I want you to really look at your own workplace. Is your organization treating symptoms, or are you actually diagnosing this system? The very next time you see high turnover, massive burnout, or just operational chaos, I want you to remember the evidence engine. Stop buying painkillers for a broken leg. Demand an ethical beta contract, triangulate the truth, map of forces at play, and start redesigning the system itself. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and remember, keep questioning the system.